Welcome to the 71st episode of the Hail Mary podcast. I'm A. Toves, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to recap our frustrating loss to Tulane. Let's get started. We said going into the game, there was no margin for error, and that proved to be correct. On a night when UTSA needed to play their best game of the year, they instead became victims of their own self-inflicted wounds, stumbling on offense and special teams and turning the ball over 5 times. Despite these errors, a strong performance from defense kept them within striking distance of a comeback throughout most of the game. However, in the end, it was too much to overcome as Tulane beat UTSA 29-16. The Roadrunners finished the regular season 8-4, 7-1 in conference, and await their bowl destination. Before we talk about the game, let's talk about the trip to New Orleans overall.
Yeah, we took the 12:45 Southwest flight on Thanksgiving Day, and might as well have been a charter flight, right?
Yeah, it was packed with Roadrunners. It was really exciting to see that many people traveling on a holiday. It kind of felt like that bowl game experience.
Absolutely, and the funny part was we had stopped to get a glass of wine, and we were trying to figure out, okay, this is who we'll probably see, but because it's a holiday, we're not really sure.
Yeah.
And then, like we said, we got to the gate, and
lo and behold, all the usual suspects were there, yeah.
And more. We actually got... Atos walked away, and UTSA cheer came up and asked a few of us that were talking if we'd like to appear in their Insta story, essentially. And so your boy over here got to be in the Insta story. So if you checked that out at all, I was there.
Can't leave him alone for a minute.
It was fun. It's fun. It got me kind of pumped for the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know that I needed to get more pumped for the game, but it was cool, right? And then, of course, on a flight, sitting next to a cheerleader, because they got the C group. C for cheer? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that's where they ended up, and, it was fun thinking, I think, of the possibilities of what could happen on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt at first bad for the lone Tulane fan and his wife that were on that flight listening to us do UTSA cheers for a minute, but,
On our return flight on Sunday, though, he was on our flight, and he seemed kind of smug as he sat there smiling, and I was like...
But he didn't say anything, so
no, he didn't.
You got to give him some credit.
He didn't. I wasn't going to say anything to him either, because I was like... Not that I was going to talk trash to him, but I wasn't going to say, good game, because I was like, you didn't do anything. So anyway, it was great though. Great seeing everybody at the stadium. Great getting a chance to, be around different UTSA fans. That's also one of the unique things about traveling is that you sit around all sorts of usually people that become kind of friendly with, in your section. And then when you go traveling, you're like, you're a season ticket holder? I had no clue.
Yeah, so you kind of get to see a different group of people. And
yeah.
Lots of kind of interesting vibes on the stadium itself and whether or not people liked the stadium, didn't like the stadium. It wasn't my favorite, but I might be slightly biased because I had a bit of an obstructed view. We were kind of sitting right where the team comes in, and so there was this gate kind of next to it, so I sort of felt like I was in a prison cage at some point.
I mean, it felt like it near the end, too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was just not the greatest of times. But before we go on to the game, I will say, though, that, I got the chance to film the team as they came into the locker room at halftime. Got to see them as they came in after the game. We weren't at our seats when they came out. Well. Yeah,
well, I will tell you that is one of the bad things about the stadium. Because it was kind of cool in that it sort of felt more like a soccer stadium, a little more intimate, and people have strong feelings about that, either liking it or not liking it. But the thing that was frustrating was when you were coming in, the team, instead of it being underground and them coming out, they were walking across, and so you couldn't get to your seat because you had to wait for the team to come in and the band and everyone else, and so that was kind of a little annoying. When you were coming in and out at halftime and leaving the game, we couldn't really leave the game the same way that we came in because the team was coming out, so we had to go down a different way. So
Just an interesting, I think, take on that stadium. Mm-hmm. It was, like you said, it was intimate, and I don't know. I'm mixed feelings on it.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. Like, I guess it was also kind of tainted because we were behind the end zone,
Right.
like in the corner of the end zone, not like the sideline end zone view, but it was right behind the end zone. It just felt. I mean, that's where the visitors sit, so
Right.
I'm not gonna complain, but you still kind of felt like there was a chance to maybe get a better seat somewhere else, and maybe we could have looked at it, but it wouldn't have benefited UTSA. So,
Right.
All right, we've been putting it off.
Yeah, let's talk about the game.
Talk about the game. Okay, my initial thoughts for you on the game were that Tulane was better than I thought they were, and I mean I thought they were good, but they looked in person just much better, and I thought the better team won because UTSA notoriously does not do well against evenly matched or better talented teams than them. You know, I think offensively, Tulane capitalized on the turnovers, but I think one of the big things was that they scored on their 4 second quarter drives that they had, and that just put UTSA in a challenging spot. I mean, defensively, they were physical and they were tenacious. They were going after that football. And I just thought overall they were just better coached because if we're going to say that they were tenacious about going after the ball, that's coaching.
Right.
If we're going to talk about the fact that they executed their offense and did some of these things well, it's because they were coached to do that. And they just executed a higher rate than UTSA did.
Yeah, I mean, right from the beginning, it just felt like we were off, and it just took me back to that Troy game. And I know we talked about, the defensive coordinator being from Troy and kind of that matchup between him and Justin Burke again, but it just really felt like that Troy game where there was this hype, this confidence, this excitement going into the game, and then the offense just struggled.
Yeah, and one of the questions I had asked in my prediction last week was, is UTSA more desperate than Tulane? And to me, the clear answer was no.
Yeah.
I thought that Tulane played more desperate. I thought that they played like this meant the world to them, and they were at home, and they were not going to surrender to this UTSA team, and this is how it played out.
Yeah.
And I guess it's frustrating because you feel like UTSA could have taken advantage of some things. Mm-hmm. There were those opportunities, but again, when it comes down to these evenly matched games / teams that are better than UTSA, it just feels like and of course I say we because of course I'm on the UTSA team, right?
Yeah.
They just don't take advantage of said opportunities enough, and it just feels like they're just not desperate enough.
Yeah, it's kind of like we get in our heads too, like
right.
I don't know, there's just something we psych up about. I mean, I thought there was that moment when Jamal Ligon forced the fumble after Frank's second interception. I thought, okay, maybe the momentum's switched. We've shaken off our cobwebs. Maybe this is where we turn it around, but it just wasn't meant to be.
Tulane wanted it more.
Yeah.
And really, I think that summarizes what we're, both trying to say is that while I think UTSA was desperate too, Tulane just wanted it that much more, and they played like it throughout. Like there was just whatever Willie Fritz told his team, they came through on that Friday. Obviously you kind of talked about within your recap about the turnovers, and you had thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of these self-inflicted wounds. I mean, hey, we talk about records all the time, and here's a record for us, UTSA. We've now, in this season, had 3 quarterbacks, a wide receiver, and a tight end throw an interception. That's got to be one for the record books, right?
I mean, not one that we want to remember, but yes,
No.
yes, yeah. That's a good point.
So yeah, I mean, it was, of course, we'll talk more about it later, but Oscar Cardenas was put in a bad position, so, and he certainly isn't a quarterback himself, so you can't give him too much criticism, but we also had the 2 fumbles that, again, we've seen Kavorian do at the beginning of the season, really had cleaned it up. The way that Tulane went after that ball, I'm not sure that was really something, again, you can hold too much against Kavorian. But you had that. You had the Robert Henry fumble. You had just that bad call on the fake punt, the pass interference call on Tulane's fake punt, and it was just kind of these self-inflicted wounds, one after another, that just became insurmountable.
I mean, I thought that at the game, the Kavorian fumble seemed like he was just hit from behind or from the side. I kind of mentioned to you, it's like Traylor said, it's always the guy you don't see. But when we actually got to rewatch it was clear that, it was the guy you don't see, but he was going after the ball and just ripped it out. The Robert Henry one, we'll talk about Cam Pettisclo in a second here when we start talking about this UTSA offense, but him having the awareness to punch that ball out, it's just pure, to me, coaching. This is what, again, they saw something in UTSA's ball handling, and I think they really went after that ball. It seemed like, as fans, we've kind of already, I think it's coming across as we're talking about it, we really wanted this win. I mean, the first rank win, it's going to happen sometime, and, obviously we're hoping for it, and I get that our predictions were both different. You said UTSA would win. I thought we'd lose.
But we both thought it was going to be closer. Part of the problem, and I think the frustration, is just because, these errors that UTSA had were just self-inflicted. Again, some of it was coaching, it was Tulane, it was the players being better, but in other cases, it was just mistakes that we made that we're not used to seeing this many in a game, and you just can't make these kind of mistakes when you're in a big game and in that kind of setting.
Yeah, and look, many of you saw on Twitter, and I saw just this complaining even at the game about the officials. It has nothing to do with the officials. And I'm going to go back to what I said after the Cure Bowl, because that was another game where it felt like, fans were really up in arms about the officials. Actually, anytime we lose, it's like everybody's just talks about the officials. But Jimmy Johnson once said, I always told our team you have to be good enough to overcome bad officiating, because there's going to be poor officiating calls in every game. And again, I feel like reiterating the same things you were talking about, but I mean, UTSA just wasn't good enough to overcome either a poor officiating call or their own mistakes. Overall, I think watching this game, it should be evident to us as UTSA fans that there's a gap. There's a gap between, Tulane, I would argue SMU, and then it's UTSA. Won't say it's like a sizable gap, but it's a gap in terms of talent, coaching, just overall program. And I think UTSA and Memphis are about the same spot, but, because of it, there's just some things that you have to look at. And that's why I kept bringing up during the previews just how weak some of the teams that UTSA was playing in their 7-game streak. Not taking anything away from UTSA, they won the games they were supposed to.
And they won it by big margins, which was different than what we've done in the past. So It shows a little progress, right?
Yeah, it shows the progress. That's something that we hadn't really experienced in the last 2 seasons. However, you still see this gap now when you come and play a Tulane in New Orleans, and you see just where this team needs to go. And that's okay, because I think overall it gives us a North Star. It tells us exactly what we're going to need to do and what we need to change within the football program to get to be a Tulane-like team and to be able to contend for New Year's Six Bowls, to contend against P5 schools, more routinely. It's not going to be easy. And obviously, we're not taking for granted anything that UTSA has done within CUSA, the conference streaks that Traylor has put together in terms of being undefeated at home and, just having essentially losing, 3 conference games away from the Dome.
Right.
None of that's taken for granted. It's just, you have to continue evolving, and to continue evolving, you're going to have to find...
take another step forward.
You've got to find what those gaps are, and I think we're finding those out. And to me, Traylor looked like that on the sidelines. When they kept giving shots of him, he looked like he knew these are some of the things we have to clean up. But the question is going to be, where does he get to it, right?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I thought one of the comments that the commentators made about Traylor was, he said he goes with his gut on 4th downs, but his gut's just letting him down today.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get into it here. But, again, nothing wrong with what Traylor's done. Just let's just continue to build, and it's going to include him because he's going to have to do, I think, a better job in terms of figuring out some of these weaknesses and how he can take advantage of them when he's taking on some of these teams. All right, let's start talking about the offense. My keys to the game were win the money downs, third and fourth downs. We talked about Tulane's defense allowed third down conversions at a 37.2% rate, and they allowed fourth down conversions at a 27.8% rate, which is big because that means that you need to continue drives, right? Well, UTSA was 7 for 17 on third down conversions. They were 5 of 7 in the first quarter, but they were 2 of 10 in the 3 remaining quarters. Mm-hmm. They could not extend drives when they got to third down.
Right.
Second, third, and fourth quarter, and that is huge because they do end up going 3 for 6 on fourth down conversions, but some of those fourth downs happened on that very last sort of trash time. I mean, it wasn't trash time, but it kind of felt like a trash time touchdown drive that you were like, all right, well, they Tulane's let the gas off. There's not much time left. They're getting ready because they know there's going to be an onside coming. The other thing was finish in the red zone. Tulane was tied for last in allowing scores in the red zone at 90.9%. UTSA went 1 for 2.
Yeah.
Like, they should have hit both. Like, if you hit both and you still lose, okay.
Yeah.
Again, no worries. But those are some things to kind of consider. So, overall, the offense gains 375 total yards, which is 177 rushing, 198 passing on Tulane's defense. I just felt that the offense was inefficient and just sputtered against a stout, Tulane defense. We talked about Shieldwood quite a bit, and I've become quite a bit of a Shieldwood fan. Not because he stifled UTSA's offense, but because he seems to find a way to throw Frank off. He knows that, I guess figuratively, Frank's the head of the snake, right? Mm-hmm. He is what controls this offense. And Shieldwood has found ways to bother Frank. Right. And because of it, we talked about already how forced 4 turnovers, made stops on 10 of 13 offensive drives. In the bowl game, when he was Troy's defensive coordinator, he made stops on his defense made stops on 11 of 14 drives. Like, there's a common theme here. They also sacked Frank 3 times, and they hurried him. Now, it says 20 times per PFF, and it felt like it. It felt like Frank was hurried quite a bit.
Right.
Actual official stats, they said 2. But I don't know. I mean, 22, is there a 0 missing? Is there an extra 0 put in there?
Yeah.
It felt like he was under constant pressure. Yeah.
More than 2. Yeah, and there was this moment that I captured on the rewatch where it's like the third quarter, kind of getting down to the end of the third quarter, and the camera pans in on Frank, and he just looks stunned. Like, he just looks like he is stunned, dazed, doesn't know what's going on. Like, how did we get to this point in the game? And I thought that just kind of summed up the offense right there. Like, Shieldwood's got into Frank's head, and, you would have hoped at that point that whether it was Traylor or Justin Burke or the quarterback coach or somebody could have kind of gotten to him and helped him kind of get back into that rhythm. Whether it was, that confidence boost, talking to him, play calling, whatever, but it didn't happen, and you could just see it on Frank's face. Like, he didn't know what else to do.
And, after a 6-touchdown performance against USF.
Right, the week before.
You kind of wish that he had left a couple touchdowns in his belt clip there to, fire off in this one. But, it just didn't happen. And while Shieldwood was constructing the defensive plan against this potent UTSA offense, safety Cam Pettisclo was essentially the hammer for Tulane's defense on the field, caused 2 turnovers, deflected the first ball to Josh Cephas, and which ended up getting intercepted. And then that Robert Henry fumble that we kind of talked about already, he punched down on coming from behind. Robert Henry caused that fumble that Tulane recovered. And, overall had 6 tackles. He'd faced UTSA before. I had completely forgotten about it, but he faced UTSA back in 2020 at the First Responder Bowl when he played for Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns. So there he is, causing havoc once again. I think he had like 6 tackles in that game too. I went back and looked at those stats. But it's safe to say, right, that Shield Wood, his defense got the best of Justin Burke's offense.
Oh yeah.
In this rematch, right? Like it just really felt like Justin Burke, I think, had a good offensive plan, but it just felt like he just didn't have that handful of plays that he could go back to and say, this really worked well against Shield's defense. Once again, it felt like Shield's defense took the early blows from UTSA in the first quarter and then adjusted, and then and it's hard to play from behind. Any quarterback is going to be hard to play from behind, and honestly, Frank was off in this game. He didn't have his greatest game. He talked about it afterwards. He even tweeted it out saying, "Look, I didn't play well." Fair enough, Frank. I just felt like some of his passes were inaccurate. And some of the other ones were just short of the target. Key stat though that I looked at was he only had 2 passes that were 20+ yards, both incomplete. But when that usually happens, that means we can't get the top off this defense.
Right.
And because of it, the defense starts creeping up on the run and really starting to stifle us. And they did to a point. They still had some big runs, but for it to be truly effective and to get the kind of performance that we've seen from Frank Harris, he also can't be missing some of his open receivers, and he missed several of them. There was more than usual, I thought, but again, a lot of it goes back to, I think, Shield Wood. We've already mentioned it before, but I think he made Frank so uncomfortable that he started hearing those footsteps throughout the rest of the game, and it got in his head, like you said, and it just didn't help that the offensive line also seemed overwhelmed by that defensive line. It just you can't pop off the top of this defense. You're having problems, keeping the protection on Frank. The more we kind of talk about it, the more I'm like, I don't know what kind of adjustments can be made.
Right.
So you can still talk about, getting out coached, but you can also talk about the fact that we threw what we had out there and it just didn't work. What did work was Rocco Griffin. I thought he played well. He had that nice touchdown capping off that drive early in the game that kind of brought us back and, essentially put us at 7-7 and tied the game up. And it gave us hope.
Right.
To maybe something's happening here. But, what it really came down to is just not enough plays made on offense.
I thought, Josh Cephas, it was another bright spot. His yards after catch, his blocking. I mean, man, he sacrificed his body on that one block I think it was for McEwen. And, it looked like for a while that maybe he was going to be down and out for the rest of the game because it looked like he hurt his neck. He eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark for receiving yards this season. He's just 87 yards shy of Zachary Franklin's single-season record from 2022. So, assuming he's going to be in the bowl game, he should easily be able to beat that.
Yeah, and I think the part we're going to lament more out of all of this is just the fact that how could we have gotten Josh open a little bit more, and how could we have put Frank in a better position to get some easy open throws to Josh. I think that's the frustrating part, is that there were still good performances, there were still good moments. It just wasn't enough today.
Yeah, it just didn't all come together.
Yeah. Overall, I think offensively they didn't step up. Special teams wise, though, you had some takes here, though.
Yeah, overall, I thought special teams was inconsistent as well. I mean, you had some bright spots again. Chase Allen had that 40-yard field goal. Good punting by Lucas Dean. Tate Sandell had the 2 touchbacks that got him to 40 touchbacks for the season. Now he has a single-season record over Hunter Duplessis. But then there was that fake punt. It was just a bad call, in my opinion, by us to do it. It wasn't executed well. Obviously, that kind of turned... I don't know if it turned the trajectory of the game, but it certainly didn't help get the momentum back by any means. And then we had the pass interference call on Tulane's fake punt, which they did immediately after us. Didn't pick up the fact that their backup quarterback was in there as the quote-unquote punter.
Yeah, and what it came down to me was the fact that on our fake punt was that if you're going to call the fake punt, why don't you just leave Frank out there? You know, for me,
Yeah.
I'd rather have Frank scrambling around and trying to make something happen and throw an interception if that happens, and just go, you know what? That's better than having like Oscar in there and putting him in a position where he's rolling off to his right and he's only got one receiving threat. Like I think it sounded good, but there's also got to be a way to bail this out. To me, the bailout is Frank. Mm-hmm. Like that's why we have a dual threat quarterback. So why not use him in that situation to get you that first down? Mm-hmm. I know it was like 4th and 8, but still, I trust Frank more than I trust Oscar. And it really comes down to because Frank's the athlete, right?
Or do what Tulane did. Throw in Eddie Lee or something as your punter, you know?
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, that's a great point too. Now I know there's controversy over the Tulane big punt, whether you had Chris Brazell, who's their top wide receiver, and I say top wide receiver because he's the only one standing right now. But we'll get to that in a second. But having been split out wide and not recognizing that, potentially calling a timeout and going, well, no, something's off here. Just a failure by also the coaching staff, and this is where I'm saying like this is where you look at things and say, this is where you got out coached. Mm-hmm. This is where they said, oh, you can call a fake punt. We'll call one too. Now, whether it's pass interference or not, at this point,
it is what it is.
Yeah. It doesn't matter to me because, again, going back to the quote I said, there's going to be poor officiating calls. Make the stop, and then you keep rolling. But the problem is that are you really going to make the case that that PI call really changed the momentum, because the momentum had already been changed by the fact that we had thrown the interception a few plays before, as you had mentioned. So I don't know. I mean, say what you will about it. If we go on and talk about this onside kick, they were expecting it. Like
of course.
Tate was put in a position where it's like you got to execute one when somebody's expecting it, and that's not where he has excelled before on the onside.
Right, exactly.
He's caught them off guard, and it was going to be a low percentage play. But at that point, you also knew. I mean, game's over, right? Like there's only like a minute. I think it was like a minute 45, minute 30 left. If we got it, great. Maybe that gets a little more exciting, but that means you still got to get another onside kick, right? Exactly. It just the odds were stacked up there. All right, we'll go on to the defense then. Keys for the defense, really it was simple, win the turnover battle. Because I felt that if our defense was able to cause more turnovers than Tulane's defense, then that puts our offense in a much better position, gives them shorter fields. Even if we're kicking some field goals, that's okay because we're scoring points and we're putting pressure on Tulane. Safe to say that did not happen. We lost a turnover battle officially 5-1, but it was really 4-1 because I wouldn't count the defense, forcing that interception on Oscar as one there. But either way, I mean, this defense gave up 352 total yards, 227 rushing, 125 passing, less than what UTSA gained. Now, of course, they had some shorter fields, Tulane offense. But again, you mentioned the fact that this offensive line had only given up 9 sacks in the AAC, only gave up 1 sack here, and per PFF 4 quarterback hurries. I mean, if we couldn't pressure Pratt, if we couldn't get the sacks, this was already going to be a tough deal for the defense.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising that we weren't able to get more pressure, because we'd heard also that this offensive line, again, has been banged up for Tulane. They've rearranged some positions. They did have some people that were back and healthy, but I just expected us to get more of a push on that and for, Trey Moore and Danye to be able to get a little bit more pressure on Pratt, but it just really didn't happen.
This defense had really cranked up their pressure throughout the 7-game streak. Outside of, I think, the Temple game. Because the Temple game really didn't get any pressure, but it seemed like it started really getting cranked up from UAB on. And to not be able to come up big here against Tulane, it certainly leaves a bitter taste in their mouth because of the fact that they still played well. I mean, a pass defense, giving up 125 passing yards. Look, our cornerbacks were essentially draped on the receivers. Mm-hmm. I believe it was Zay Frazier and then also Cam Alexander and even Rashad Wisdom had great coverage, and Michael Pratt still found ways to get the ball to Chris Brazell, and Brazell made plays.
I know. I mean, Tulane was missing 2 of their 3 top wide receivers, like you mentioned, and it didn't matter. Because that guy Chris was like, I got it. I'm here.
Didn't someone say that healthy teams don't win championships?
Tough teams do? Yeah, apparently. Guess
tough,
we weren't the tough enough team, but, I felt like our defense, again, this wasn't maybe their most spectacular game, but they played well enough to continue to give us a chance. And,
yes, yeah.
Unfortunately, the offense just wasn't able to kind of get over that hump. But, it's hard to fault them too much. I mean, again, they did force a fumble. There's always, 1 or 2 times when you're going to give up a big pass, but it wasn't one of those situations where you felt like the defense let the team down by any means.
I mean, if you compared it to the Temple game, right? The Temple, E.J. Warner just carved up this defense. Pratt was not doing that.
No, and Pratt really didn't have that great of a passing night, but, again, they managed to still get it done on...
Here's what eats at me, and you're going to laugh. But it goes back to the Troy game when Gunnar Watson's dad comes after me at the Embassy Suites that we were staying at, and he's like chuckling, drinking his beer, and he comes up and he's all, my boy didn't have a very good game, but he threw that one pass, and I'm like, oh, this guy again. That's all I was thinking about when I saw Michael Pratt playing. And this is not to diminish Michael Pratt. He still played a very good game. He was gutsy. He was tough. He took
still better than Gunnar Watson.
Yeah. Absolutely better than Gunnar Watson. But, it really came down to the fact is we've mentioned it before, but the big difference between the two defenses was the fact that Tulane's defense, their secondary was so good at deflecting passes without getting called for pass interference, and they were so good at ball hawking. I mean, we've already kind of talked about Cam Pettislow, but still, this team being able to kind of enforce their will on the UTSA offense, I don't know that it's surprising. The other part of me still is surprised because I felt like this UTSA team was a little better than than I really wanted to admit. I guess.
I think we were better than how we played, in other games. And so again, you needed to see our best game, and we just didn't bring our best game, and so that made it all the worse.
Gotta say though, Jamal Ligon looked like he really wanted this game because I thought he had an absolutely terrific game. That fumble that you talked about, the way he just blew through the offensive line, like it was a thing of beauty. It was terrific, and it came at a time that it was most needed.
Right,
and that I thought was clutch there from him was that when I was hoping that we could potentially, manufacture a turnover, there came Jamal, and it continues his stellar play that just seemed to continue to elevate. I mean, I joke about the fact that you had called him out, whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It was the fact that he just played well. And I thought the secondary also played really well. I thought our linebackers could have done better. And our defensive line, I thought, got pushed around a little bit more than would have liked. But as you said, you just can't. It's all going to be nitpicking if we continue to say, well, this guy didn't do this or this guy didn't do this.
Yeah.
You ran into a better team, and overall, this is what's going to happen.
Before we go, the elephant is back in the room, so let's talk about him.
Frank's back. One more year, right? 8 years?
Not that elephant.
Oh.
I meant the coaching carousel. Traylor is now being considered for the Houston job. We kind of went on this whole roller coaster with him being considered / interviewed for the A&M job, and we said one of the more realistic opportunities for Traylor was Baylor and Houston. Well, we know Baylor's not going to be open this year, but Houston is, and now he is allegedly interviewing for the second time.
Yeah, I mean, I did go out there and tweet and said that, this 2 interviews means he's interested.
Oh, yeah.
You would not entertain a second one unless you felt like that was a job that you could envision not only taking but doing some really good things at. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I get a kick out of some of these UTSA fans that were like, "Oh, he'd never leave."
Oh yeah, he's too loyal.
For fill in the blank.
Right.
And like you said, too loyal. Yeah, no, that's he's like any one of us. If we get a better job offer and we get a chance for more money, we're gonna leave. So why wouldn't he?
Well, yeah, and if anything, he's going to use it to leverage something else in his current job, right?
Right.
It is interesting, though. There's been these comments that really Willie Fritz is the lead candidate, and that Traylor might be the backup.
Yeah.
And Willie Fritz did not shut down, that rumor when they asked him about it in his press conference. He said, they're gonna wait until after the championship game. I mean, he didn't say, "Oh, I'm not talking to them," or "What are you talking about?" or "We have 18 seniors," and blah, blah, blah. He just, he said, when they asked him, "Are you going to make, Houston and these other schools wait?" He said, "Yep. There you go."
And good for him. Like, he's done very well in his career. So,
right.
Obviously, if they're looking for success, Willie Fritz has just beat Jeff Traylor, so
right.
why wouldn't you say this is our top guy?
I know. It was interesting. One of the thoughts I had about the game was I felt like the team wanted to win going into it. I felt like the fans wanted to win. But I kind of felt like Traylor needed that win to propel him to some of these bigger jobs. Now, maybe he doesn't. It does seem a little odd, though. If you kind of look at the pluses and minuses, right, for Houston, it's like, you're going to hire the guy who couldn't beat the guy you just fired twice?
Yeah.
How does that feels weird, right? What's Traylor's opening line going to be at his press conference? Well, if you can't beat him, join him. God bless and coos up. I don't know.
Wow.
It just... So... All kidding aside, there are, some interesting kind of parallels here, right, with Houston, right?
Yes.
First of all, that Traylor's being interviewed because of the success that he's had at UTSA. He's being interviewed because of his Texas ties, his recruiting. And in all fairness, I'm not trying to take any of that away from him. He obviously can build a culture, and one of the things that Dana Holgorsen had issues with was... how do you interact with the students? How do you build that culture? I mean, he was arguing with the students, after games.
I mentioned it, was it last week? I think I said, he was arguing with them. So
yeah.
It felt weird that maybe they wouldn't consider it, but it was like, well, it didn't seem like they had the buyout. And
right.
He was kind of arrogant about the fact that he was like, they don't have the buyout, so I'm safe.
Right, exactly. And
here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile... We all know Traylor's going to be, very different with his interactions with those students. But then on the flip side, Houston is looking to build itself in the Big 12, and they want to win. The Big 12 is somewhat open, without Texas and Oklahoma next year.
Yeah.
But here's the coach that didn't beat the guy that you just fired twice, never beat a ranked team. And one of the other issues with Houston is that they're still not as well resourced as the other Big 12 schools. And another complaint about Holgorsen was that he was constantly complaining about the fact that he didn't have the NIL funding, that he didn't have the facilities yet. I mean...
Well, look, maybe Traylor just is looking for jobs like that because he's just miserable and wants to just complain about stuff. Because at this point... Yes, it's very reminiscent of UTSA. If that's what you want, to me, we've said it obviously, but I'll reiterate it. He has to do what's best for him.
Sure.
And if that means leaving, thank you, Jeff Traylor. We'll move on to the next person, right? That's just the way it goes. And it doesn't say anything about UTSA if they allow him to leave, because what it really comes down to is you can't change him. I mean, he's talked about the fact that he has more money than he'll ever know how to spend, yet he's seeking more money.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, if 2.8, which is what we would be paying him, is enough for him, is more than enough for him, then why are you seeking more? Because just like all of us, we're going to keep trying to look for a better opportunity and a better chance. So, good for him. If that's what happens, I'll enjoy him getting beat up, next season
and we'll always
by the Big 12 teams.
We'll always have those 2 banners to remember him by, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not taking anything away from him either, but it's going to be another, rebuilding job. And, how is he going to handle that piece of it? I mean, it's still going to be sort of a rebuilding job here at UTSA as well. So it's not like he's leaving like, a perfect situation. He's got to rebuild some here too.
And in an attempt to keep him, the news is linked that we are looking at an additional $2 million in funding for the football program, for increased salary pool, for recruiting staff, assistants, additional budget for recruiting, nutrition, and the practice field cover that, Traylor's been talking about needing for a while. So if he does decide to stay, at least, maybe he's used Houston as a carrot to get some of these things a little bit quicker than they would have otherwise come to him. So at the end of the day, I think the program's going to be okay, whatever happens. But it will be interesting to see how this plays out. And it's certainly going to be a diversion for us at UTSA. And, you wonder how it's going to impact Tulane as they start to kind of gear up towards their game for SMU.
Yeah, and I think the last thing for this is something you've always said, which is you knew what you were getting into when you got here.
Yeah.
It's going to be the same situation when you go to Houston. When you start complaining about, the facilities and stuff like that, you knew what you were getting into. This wasn't a surprise. We didn't put a fake curtain up and say, hey, look at our outdoor stadium we have on campus, and look at this beautiful covered practice facility that we have, and then go, just kidding, after they sign the contract. They know he knows what he's getting, so again, so be it, whatever happens. I just would rather get this thing over with so that we can move on with something else. There's plenty of other sports that are having success, so let's,
Yeah, we still need money for some other coaching changes we'll get to later on. But as we move into the American Roundup, SMU, again, they just annihilated Navy 59-14, but they lost their quarterback in the process. He is out for the season. So it's going to be interesting because right now, Tulane opened as a 5.5-point favorite. I saw that they've changed to a 4-point favorite. And it's sort of interesting given the fact that you're talking about SMU playing without Preston Stone. But I also wonder if this Willie Fritz, will he go to Houston kind of talk is also kind of factoring into that and maybe making people think perhaps Tulane isn't going to come in as prepared for this game against SMU as they would otherwise.
That's a fair point. I mean, Traylor always talked about the fact that his players are used to the distractions and that they know how to deal with them. The question is, does Tulane? Because I don't know that Willie Fritz has really been thrown around, even though he's a really good coach.
Well, last year there was the discussion about him potentially going to Georgia State, kind of right at that same time. So, but, we don't really know exactly how they're going to handle that. And I can't remember what the exact timing of that discussion was.
But going back to what you said when we were talking about the Houston job, you said that he didn't, essentially throw it off the table. He did not shut it down, no. Right. So I think what's different from last season is I want to say that he kind of shut that down a little bit more. So, especially with the change in athletic director at Tulane, it could be that he just wants something different. So this could absolutely affect this team, negatively for this game.
Other games in the American, Rice beat FAU 24-21 without JT Daniels, and they secured a bowl for themselves. So great for Rice to get to that bowl eligibility. Last year they were able to go to a bowl, but it was as a 5-7 team, I believe. Yeah,
I mean, it's all really been about their academic ranking, and that's how they've gotten to go bowling since, I think, was it 2013 was the last time, because I think they won the Conference USA at that point. But yeah, I'm happy for them. I'm absolutely thrilled with the fact that they actually got to 6 wins. This is a team that, obviously has kind of struggled, and, they don't have a ton of talent, but they certainly play hard. They've played better. And, outside of that kid, that wide receiver that's trashed the UTSA that didn't do anything, it's a bunch of kids that I think really need this bowl trip to get some more, practice time in. But more importantly, I think it's a good way, and I want to say that McCaffrey, I think this is last season, so it's possibly a good way to send off JT Daniels and McCaffrey.
South Florida dominated Charlotte 48-14, and they too secured bowl eligibility. And again, it's very important, I think, that we talk about these teams that got to bowl eligibility, because without Rice in South Florida getting bowl eligibility, it would have only been Tulane, UTSA, SMU, and Memphis, those top four. And we've kind of talked about those top four and the parity between the rest of the field. So I think it was really important for the conference to have these other two teams get to that level. We went on and on about Alex Golesh in South Florida last time, so we don't need to repeat all of that. But they pulled it off. They got there.
But I do want to say thank you, Alex Golesh. You listened clearly to our podcast and slapped around Biff Poggi.
That's right.
So I appreciate you, Alex.
All right, so piggybacking on top of that bowl discussion, the projections for where UTSA is going to end up, they're kind of all over the place right now, so it's a little difficult to make that educated guess. Don Harris had said that the Military Bowl or the Fenway Bowl were the most likely bowls for UTSA, and kind of reading the tea leaves of different comments that have been made by Dr. Campos previously, those comments from Don Harris, other comments from different commentators, it seems like the school is really looking for that destination bowl as well as a way to send off the team. That may be not exactly what the fans want, because that may limit the ability of some people to travel to get to see that last game with Frank Harris. But it seems like that's really the direction they're going. So I would expect, it's going to be Fenway, maybe the Military Bowl. Hawaii Bowl has also been another one that's kind of been thrown out there. The moral of the story is we won't really know until December 3rd, but don't expect this to be a bowl in Texas or somewhere that's driving distance. Crazier things have happened, so certainly that could change, but it doesn't seem like that's the direction we're headed.
It would be good, I think, to have them sent off somewhere else, because it just feels like what this pretty much 2019 recruiting class did for UTSA. It just feels like a nice swan song is a Hawaii or, I guess Fenway, but I mean, somewhere away, because I think that on a beach somewhere would be good for these guys. They, as much as we've thrown in some criticisms this year and nitpicks about some of the way they played, they've set the stage for UTSA to do some great things. So hopefully they get that nice destination to be sent off to whatever career they have after this.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about volleyball. Unfortunately, they fell in their last game to East Carolina, 1-3. They finished their season with 15 wins. That was still the best finish they've had since 2019, though.
You jinxed them.
I did jinx them. I said they could finish no better than even at 15. And
no worse. You said
no worse. Sorry, no worse. Yeah, not no better. Yeah, no worse than 15.
And look, I mean, we joke about that, but there was an unfortunate injury to Putnicki, and then after that, it just, I watched them play. I turned it on. That's right. I mean, I didn't really have much going on that Wednesday, so I'm like, during the middle of the day, I'm going to watch me some volleyball. And, they worked hard. They did, I thought, played well. It just, you can, much like the football team, you came back, you've made some great progress. Now you know where some of the gaps are, and let's fill them with some recruiting, and let's keep building, because I thought they had some great momentum coming into the final stretch of the season.
Yeah, and Mia Sorensen was named to the second team for the American Conference.
Nice.
All right, let's talk a little bit about soccer with Sasha Dade.
Yeah, last week I had talked about the fact that she's representing Samoa on their women's national soccer team during the Pan-Pacific Games. I messed up. I thought that the time of the game would be about 2.5 hours before the UTSA game, but I think it was a misprint from what I had read. It really wasn't, so not sure that. I mean, there wasn't I thought there would be some link to the game. There wasn't. No biggie. But anyway, Sasha had a nice game. She scored 2 goals to help Tonga, to help them beat Tonga and advance to the medal round. overall, she scored 3 goals in the tourney, and she's tied for third overall in overall scoring, goal scoring. Unfortunately, though, this past Monday, Samoa lost 5-1 to Papua New Guinea. So they're going to have a third place match on 12-1. It's essentially the semifinal, it's third place. So it's kind of like the bronze medal game. So, still an opportunity for her to, help lead the Samoa team. But she seems like she's had quite a bit of an impact, and it's really good. I mean, she's a good player, and, they kept talking about the fact that, and some of the things I've read is that, she's really brought a toughness to the team. So, good for her, and good for her to continue to show some of that scoring prowess.
All right, let's talk a little bit about basketball. The men's basketball hosted the Roadrunner Classic at the Convo this past weekend. They split their games. They lost to Jacksonville State 62-77, but they beat UIW 90-80.
Didn't really get to see a lot of those games. Wish we had so we could have just some things to, I think, break down. But unfortunately, when you're in New Orleans, it's not like you can just pop up some of those games. So
yep.
It made it difficult. But I will say that, good to see them at least win. Get a win in there.
Against UIW, we got to have that win against our crosstown rival, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a struggle. I mean, I think we saw them play. Was it last week when we saw them take on Houston Christian? I think it was, and we kind of broke that down and talked to some of the issues there. What really comes down to is the fact that it's just going to be an up and down season, and so hopefully they can work out some issues here before they get into conference.
They will have a rematch this week on Thursday against Lamar at the Convo at 8 p.m. So if you have an opportunity, come out and support them or watch the game on ESPN+. On the women's side, on the other hand, they beat Sam Houston 63-56, came from behind in the fourth quarter, and were able to put that win together. Interesting, Alyssa Coleman was their leading scorer at 16 points in this game.
Yeah, it looked like we were having success inside. So I got to see that a little bit of the fourth quarter, and it just looked like the typical UTSA game where they kind of like, I hate to bring this up again, but it's like Shieldwood, like kind of feeling out the team in the first half, and then the second half really shutting down their opponent. And it's just kind of, it doesn't matter who goes in now. It just feels like they'll come in, take care of their responsibilities, make an impact, and the team ends up finding a way to win. And we have to say this team has been gritty, just absolutely gritty. I know I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again, just to continue to rehash it for anybody that listens. They're earning wins that they would have lost last season.
Right.
And that is progress, and that is terrific. And
especially
let's not forget,
since Jordan
Thank you.
Jordan Jenkins is not playing yet.
Their best player is not playing. So it says a lot about the work that these ladies have put in to put themselves in a position to win. That also goes out to Coach Aston, Coach Carey, Coach Davenport, and Coach Miles. They've just done a great job of challenging this team, and the team has clearly responded. And it's really kind of that they've been known as a dark horse within the AAC. I still think they end up probably in the middle of the pack, but I think they make the tournament and the AAC tournament, excuse me. But that's big too, because any extra games that these girls can play, they're just getting better and better. And I said it before, but I'll say it again. I'm excited to see what happens when Jordan comes back, because these guys are just playing hard, and they're playing well. So they're going to be a tough matchup for any team that they face in the AAC.
They will be playing against Texas State on
go.
Thursday at 5 p.m. at the Convo. So, yes, that means we have a doubleheader. The women are playing Thursday, 5 p.m. at the Convo. The men are playing at 8 p.m. in the Convo against Lamar. So, if you've got an opportunity to go out on Thursday, you can see a little bit of both teams.
And we will be there for at least the women's game.
That's right. And then the women are playing again on Sunday at the Convo against UTEP at noon. Those games, again, are all on ESPN+. If you aren't able to get out, at least you'll have the opportunity to watch them. All right, well, I think that about wraps it up for us here on the Hail Married podcast. I'm Atoves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back in the next couple of weeks when we know who our bowl game opponent is, so we can preview that game.
Birds up.